Luther King Day official at a Rose Garden ceremony today. Mr. Reagan had expressed early reservations about honoring the slain civil rights leader with a national holiday, but he signed the bill that had passed both the House and Senate by large margins. Members of the King family, as well as civil rights and congressional leaders, were at the bill signing ceremony, which included singing as well as speeches by President Reagan and others.
The truth will set us free. Truth will set us free. Truth will set us free someday. Oh, in my heart, I really believe we shall overcome someday.
Traces of bigotry still mar America. So each year on Martin Luther King Day, let us not only recall Dr. King, but rededicate ourselves to the commandments he believed in and sought to live every day. Thou shalt love thy God with all thy heart, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And I just have to believe that all of us, if all of us, young and old, Republicans and Democrats, do all we can to live up to those commandments, then we will see the day when Dr. King's dream comes true. And in his words, all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. Land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
Yeah, baby, we are back. Welcome back to WLTH 1370 AM Issues and Answers, My Country, with Scott Cannon here on Friday night. It is 7:26 p.m., so I got about 33 minutes and some change before I got to get out of here. If you got something to say to me, now's the time to do it. 219-885-1371. That number again, 219-885-1371. As you heard, that was our president, Ronald Reagan, signing the bill on November the 2nd, 1983. 15 years after Martin Luther King was assassinated, creating a holiday honoring Dr. King. And the reason that it is so important to celebrate that day, November the 2nd, 1983, is because this is the 40th anniversary of him signing that law that was proposed by a local legend, a local political legend, Miss Katie Hall, who actually proposed the bill itself. Now, the idea of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, it was promoted by labor unions in contract negotiations. Remember, Martin Luther King was assassinated. He was marching with the sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. So that sort of goes back to the initial theme at the beginning of the show in the A block, talking about the United Auto Workers. Martin Luther King knew that strong labor unions were the way to the middle class for a lot of black people specifically, and working class people in general. And so the idea of it really was promoted by labor unions in contract negotiations. After his death, John Conyers, also known for his constantly proposing reparations in Congress, from Michigan, and Senator Edward Brooke, they introduced a bill in Congress to make his birthday a national holiday. The bill first came to a vote in the United States House of Representatives in 1979. Yes. However, it fell 5 votes short of the number needed for passage. Now, 2 of the main arguments mentioned by opponents of the law at the time were that a paid holiday for federal employees would be too expensive and that a holiday to honor a private citizen would be contrary to long-standing tradition because MLK had never held any public office. Only two other figures have had national holidays in the United States honoring them: George Washington and Christopher Columbus. Let me get this call here. Hello, caller. Hello, caller.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you need to talk up.
I wanted you to give the time sometime. That's all.
Could you repeat that?
Could you please sometime give the time?
I can't hear you, ma'am. Your phone is really staticky.
Give the time sometime.
I just did it. I said it's 7:26.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh. Whew. I mean, you guys got to start listening. I just said that the time is 7:26 a few minutes ago, coming out of the break. But as I was saying, soon after, no, I was at only two other figures have had national holidays in the United States honoring them: George Washington and Christopher Columbus. Now, there has to be, ironically, these were both slave owners and people who participated in mass genocides. So I guess you could argue that Martin Luther King is the only one who actually is not somebody who participated in slavery and genocide, who is now being honored with their own holiday. I forgot who said this, but that Martin Luther King is the one who made the Constitution real. So, you know, it actually made it real to talk about all that freedom and liberty and justice type stuff, but to have black people considered 3/5 of a human being at the same time. That doesn't make much sense. You know, doesn't make much sense. Now, soon after this, in 1979, the King Center turned to support from the corporate community and the general public. The success of that strategy really was cemented when Stevie Wonder released the single "Happy Birthday," which I just played a few minutes ago. You know, just goes to show you, to celebrate the happy. So that just goes to show you how much that song has permeated our culture. A song that was designed to honor Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, you know, you guys hear it every week on this show to celebrate celebrity birthdays in general. And also, Stevie Wonder hosted the Rally for Peace press conference in 1981. They also got 6 million signatures, and those were collected for a petition to Congress to pass the law, which was the largest petition in favor of an issue in American history at the time. Let me get this other caller. Hello, caller.
Okay, just Scott.
Yes.
You know the KKK say blacks not human.
Well, yeah, we know this.
And also, the young lady that called in to ask for time.
Yes.
Just know the next time. Tell her the time, but 933-9000. That'll give her the time all day long.
Well, all right. Thank you.
933-9000.
933-9000.
Yeah, you know it's a 2-1 area code.
Well, yeah. I feel you.
933-9000 all day long, baby.
Well, all right. Thank you for your call.
Okay.
It's all good. Jesse Helms, Senator Jesse Helms, and John Porter East, who were both North Carolina Republicans, they were the ones who led the opposition to the holiday and questioned whether King was important enough to receive such an honor. Helms criticized King's opposition to the Vietnam War and accused him of espousing action-oriented Marxism. And I think it's important to highlight that, because it's important to remember who Martin Luther King was. Martin Luther King has been defanged and sort of neutered in so many ways that it is easy to forget that he was considered a radical in this country. People called him a communist. People called him a socialist. You can go online now and still see the pictures of people from the 1950s and 60s saying race mixing is communism. The civil rights organization in general was thought to be communist and socialist. They blamed Russia for the civil rights movement. Mind you, I think it was about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe 6 months ago, I actually talked about the documentary Scandalize My Name and played a lot of clips from that documentary of all these people, Harry Belafonte, Ruby Dee, Ossie Davis, who were considered communist and socialist for fighting for civil rights. Dr. King was no different. And his opposition to segregation and the Vietnam War were seen as very, very, very radical stances at the time. He was hated by 80% of white America at the time of his death. In Gallup polls, he was very unpopular with white America and not tremendously popular with black America. 50% of black America said that they disapproved of Dr. King at the time of his death. A lot of people were, by that point, so frustrated that they were turning to more radical elements of the civil rights movement. People like the Nation of Islam and the Black Panthers, who were speaking more of a, action-oriented brand of, black empowerment, who were talking about black power and maybe instead of nonviolent resistance, sometimes violent resistance, talking about arming themselves. And so Martin Luther King wasn't even terribly popular with black people at the time of his death. You look at the polls at the time in 1968. Jesse Helms actually led a filibuster against the bill. And on October the 3rd, 1983, he submitted a 300-page document to the Senate alleging that Martin Luther King had association with communists. But it was Democratic New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan who declared Helms's document a packet of filth and threw it on the Senate floor and stomped on it. Wow. That's I'm sure that was quite a sight. Now, President Ronald Reagan originally opposed the holiday. Of course he did. Citing cost concern, I'm sure. When asked to comment on Helms' accusation of King being a communist, the president said, "Well, we'll know in 35 years, won't we?" Referring to the eventual release of the FBI surveillance tapes that had been previously sealed. This bill also established the Martin Luther King Jr. Federal Holiday Commission to oversee the observance of the holiday, and Coretta Scott King, who was Dr. King's wife, was made a member of this commission for life by President George H.W. Bush in May of 1989. Now, it's important to remember that Katie Hall actually had just gotten to Congress in 1983. She had just been named to finish the term of Adam Benjamin Jr., who had died suddenly of a heart attack in 1982. Gary Mayor Richard Hatcher is the one who actually who was tasked with selecting the candidate to run in a special election to compete for the last month of Benjamin's term. And Hatcher actually chose Indiana State Senator Katie Hall to serve out the remainder of Adam Benjamin Jr.'s term. So she was a newly elected congresswoman. She was actually the first black woman to represent Indiana in Congress. When she arrived in Washington, D.C., she was the chairwoman of the Subcommittee on Census and Population, which was responsible for the holidays. That's why she was so instrumental in creating this holiday. And it was actually her leadership in this subcommittee that actually pushed the struggle to make Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday a holiday over the edge. Now you got to understand where Katie Hall was coming from. What makes a lot of this so impressive? This was a woman who was a very, very poor woman who grew up on a farm in Mississippi, where my folks are from, in the 1940s and 50s. You know, she came from nothing, okay? She eventually trained as a school teacher at IU, Indiana University, taught social studies in public schools here in Gary, campaigned to elect Richard Hatcher, and ran a successful campaign herself when she won a seat in the Indiana House of Representatives. Just a few years later, she ran for Indiana State Senate and won. Her and Julia Carson were elected at the same time and were the very first black women elected to the state Senate. Now, in spite of the amount of monumental history that she created, she actually lost her bid for re-election in 1984 to Peter Visclosky, who, let me just say this, Peter Visclosky was a hell of a congressman. You know, I supported him many years. When I first started voting, I voted for him. He was one of the voices of reason during the war in Iraq. When all the other Democrats, the sellout Clinton wing of the Democratic Party, the corporate liberals, were supporting things like NAFTA, Peter Visclosky was against those things. And so I got no complaints from Peter Visclosky. He's one of the few Democrats I'm proud to say that I have voted for. As for Katie Hall, she was the elected city clerk, a position that she actually held until 2003. So, you know, once again, we have the history of this country being directly affected by one of our own here in the city of Gary, Miss Katie Hall. So rest in peace to her. Rest in peace to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all of our freedom fighters and revolutionaries out there who sacrificed so we can continue to keep up the struggle today. All right, folks, we got to go to our final commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages on Issues and Answers Friday, My Country with Scott Cannon. Please give me a call, 219-885-1371. That number again, 219-885-1371. Now, I only got about 15 minutes really about 10 before I got to get up on out of here, before Dr. Marion Williams comes in with the 2x4 and escorts me out personally. So if you're going to call now, 219-885-1371. After about 7:55, I'm not picking up that phone. All right, folks. I'll be right back.